History of the Schengen area. How the Schengen area was established and its enlargement through the years. Stand March 2016. What is the Schengen area? The Europe with Schengen area embodies a continent where internal borders exist only on maps, as almost every European country has liberally opened its doors to the other European neighborhoods for the movement of people, goods, services and capital. Which are the benefits of the Schengen area? Free movement of people, goods, services and capital between EU countries, greater economic development, simplified exchange between countries and unified European continent. Facts about Schengen area. Currently the Schengen area consists of 1. 26 European member countries. 2. Schengen external borders are over 50,000 kilometers long, consisting of 80% sea and 20% land. 3. Hundreds airports and maritime ports. 4. Land crossing points. 5. A population of over 400 million citizens. 6. An area of over 4 million square kilometers. In the 12th of July 1957, the Nordic Passport Union was established for the free movement between Sweden, Finland, Denmark, Norway. In the 17th of June 1984, France and Germany brought the topic of free movement between European countries within the framework of the European Council in Fontainebleau, where they all approved to define required conditions for the free movement of citizens. In the 14th of June 1985, 5 of the EU countries, France, Germany, Belgium, Luxembourg and Netherlands. 3 decades ago in a small village of Luxembourg, Schengen, the Schengen Agreement was signed for establishing the basis of the later to be known as Schengen area. It included the gradual elimination of national border checks between these countries and extended control of their external border. In the 19th of June 1990, a convention on the Schengen Agreement implementation was signed by the same 5 countries. It covered abolition of internal border control, defining procedures for issuing a uniform visa, operation of a single police database called SIS, Schengen Information System, and establishment of a collaborating structure between internal and immigration officers. In the 27th of November 1990, Italy joined. 1 year later, in 1991, Portugal and Spain joined. On 6th of November 1992, Greece joined. 3 years later, in the 28th of April 1995, Austria joined. 1 year later, Denmark, Finland, Sweden, Norway and Iceland joined. In the 16th of April 2003, Czech Republic, Estonia, Hungary, Latvia, Lithuania, Malta, Poland, Slovakia and Slovenia joined. In October 2004, Switzerland abolished their internal border control on December 2008 and abolished their airport border control on 2009. In February 2008, Liechtenstein abolished their internal border control on December 2011. What changes are expected to happen soon to the Schengen area? A new program for the external borders to be known as Smart Border, comprising of an improved entry and exit system. New visa procedure. And adding 2 more member countries, Bulgaria and Romania.
What's up?
Hi, Jura. We brought you here to...
When it comes to international borders, for most countries, they are hard barriers separating people, cultures, money, languages, driving sides, and more. Not to mention all the special documentation you will need just to cross that line. However, in Europe, something somewhat mind-blowing has been established. Borders that you can just stroll right across. What? How? Yep, those exist. This video was brought to you in part by Atlas on Route and from generous support on Patreon from viewers like you. Thank you. This such freedom of travel is essentially unique to most but not all of the countries of the European Union. France, Germany, Benelux, Italy, Spain, and several others have agreed to essentially abolish the borders between them and let people move around as they please. This is an area called the Schengen area, and it can be somewhat mind-blowing to outsiders, and is also the reason why I have so many Europeans in the comments in my passports video bragging about visiting 20 countries without a passport. How is this possible? Well, it is doubtful that this would be possible in any random collection of nations, but the EU is different, because one of the most basic agreements of being an EU member nation is freedom of movement. If you are a citizen of an EU member state, you're basically by extension an EU citizen, which means that Germans can move to Spain, Portuguese can work in the Netherlands, and Brits can of course insert Brexit joke here. With this in mind, this would explain how the visa policy of the area works. Since people, including visiting foreigners, can freely move into any country they want to, no Schengen area country has their own visa policy. Instead, the countries of the Schengen area all have to agree on one single collective visa policy. Thus, the Schengen area may seem to resemble one single country on visa policy maps. As for these intents and purposes, it kind of sort of is. After all, crossing from Spain into France is logistically just like crossing from Oregon into California. Of course, now's the time for me to clarify the at least hopefully obvious, which is that, yes, you do still need a passport to get into or out of the Schengen area. So if you fly from London to Berlin, you will still be stopped and questioned by immigration personnel, and if they see you fit to enter, they will give you their local version of the Schengen stamp, assuming you're from one of the countries agreed. The Schengen area consists of 22 of the 28 member states of the EU, the exceptions being the UK and Ireland, who have a permanent opt-out as they argue the islands are different, and Croatia, Romania, Bulgaria, and Cyprus, as they basically just haven't gotten around to it yet. However, there are actually 26 nations participating in Schengen, as 4 non-EU nations, Iceland, Norway, Switzerland, and Liechtenstein, have also decided to hop on, as well as Monaco, San Marino, and Vatican City, who aren't formally part of this agreement, but at the same time, come on. Somewhat interestingly though, Croatia, Romania, Bulgaria, and Cyprus, despite not currently being in the Schengen area, are obliged to follow the same visa policy for foreign nationals as the other states, as they don't have opt-outs and are of course obligated to join sometime in the future. It should be noted, however, that while Norway, Iceland, and Liechtenstein are part of the European Economic Area, and thus their citizens can live and work in the EU and vice versa, this is not the same with Switzerland and the microstates. Thus,
Okay, hi everyone. Hello everyone, and today's our short class, and I just want to make sure that everything is online. I guess we're set to go. So let me just go ahead and so I don't forget to do the attendance, and smart attendance for week 12 is your number is 411. 411 is your smart attendance number. So let me go put that in the chat, 411. And okay, and let me open up my lesson plan, which I think I already have opened here, and remind you of your paragraphs, which are due on Thursday. I guess I'll just mention this now, and maybe if I don't forget, I'll mention it again at the end of the class. On Friday, we're not going to meet face-to-face. So Friday, which is the 19th of November, this coming Friday, we will meet only online, We will not be meeting face-to-face because I have to go to a conference, an international conference in the United States. So I'm going to be teaching online that class from my hotel room in US. So it will be 7 o'clock in the evening, my time, when we meet, and which will be 9 o'clock in the morning on Friday, your time. So, but that means, again, we're just going to be meeting online for the Friday class. So this week is about social policy, justice and home affairs, and other policies. And like so much else of the let me make sure I'm sharing the screen. Like so much else of the European Union, social and justice policy and justice and home affairs policy includes justice and home affairs policies includes the Schengen area policy, namely movement across the borders of the European Union member states without any kind of passport or visa requirements. And that's the Schengen area that was discussed in those videos I was showing at the start of class. But like so much of the European Union, the European Union's actual policy behavior has been strongly affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. And to repeat what I stated earlier, right, the book that you're using in the class was written and published before the impact of the COVID-19 global pandemic became evident. And so since the pandemic began, we have seen that because of the emergency, the public health emergency, that de facto, the Schengen area has been neutralized, so that when you're during the pandemic, during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, people trying to move across borders within the European Union, like between France and Spain, for example, they would still have to stop. They would still be stopped. And the claim was that it was necessary in order to prevent spread of the coronavirus. So, and that illustrates some of the speculation about what might be the future of the European Union, that as there's more and more nationalist resistance to international globalization of the countries of the European Union, particularly among those sections of society in Spain or France or Germany, among those groups of people that feel particularly threatened by globalization, with more and more movement of international people coming into the country and increasing the diversity of the society, while also those people who are often people that are less well educated, who do not speak foreign languages well, they feel more and more threatened by they tend to feel more and more threatened by what they view as their threats to their traditional way of life, by the increasing diversity of their societies as a result of Europeanization and globalization. And so you see the rise of these Eurosceptic parties, these populist parties in Italy, in France, in all of the European Union member states. And one of the big sources of power, of fuel, of energy for those movements is this hostility to immigration, and particularly immigration coming from non-European countries, coming from Africa and Asia, Middle East into the European Union. And the blame placed, or the scapegoating placed, or the blame placed upon the European Union as making it easier for people who come into a country on the border of the European Union, like Italy or Greece. Then because they're in their Schengen area, those people who come into those countries might end up or aim to go to Germany or to Sweden or Finland or Norway, where they might be able to find a job because there might be more employment opportunities in those countries than, say, in Italy. Now, of course, according to the Dublin rules, the Dublin Convention is named after, of course, the capital of the state of Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, requires that refugees coming into the European Union member states from Turkey or from Libya by boat, for example, that if they apply for asylum, they have to stay in that country where they first entered the European Union, and they have to apply for asylum there and have to stay in that country. They have to stay in that country until their asylum application is processed, until their asylum application is considered, and it might be rejected, but even considering or processing the application can take years. So you see tens of thousands of people who are now living, for example, in Greece, remaining in Greece, coming from, say, Turkey and other countries, that are staying in Greece because under the Dublin Convention, the Dublin rules, those applicants who apply for asylum in the European Union, because they entered Greece as the first point of entry in the European Union, they have to stay in Greece. So you can imagine, if you're a nationalist, xenophobic, populist leader in Greece, you're very upset about, you might well be appealing to people's degree of being angry about all of these thousands of people coming from other parts of the world who are now forced to stay in Greece, to stay in big tent refugee camps that require resources. Those people have to be, they have to be taken care of. They have to be given medical attention. They have to be fed. Those people typically are not allowed to work, right? They're not allowed to take jobs in Greece. So, but they still have to have a place to live, and they have to have food. So they don't have access to a great deal of money, but they have to be given some money so they can buy food. And of course, if you're a political entrepreneur, a xenophobic populist in Greece, you might claim that those people are coming to Greece and are forced to stay in Greece because Greece is part of the European Union, and they think that if they get to Greece, that sooner or later they're going to be able to get through Greece to Germany or wherever. In other words, blaming the European Union for this influx of people into these countries like Greece and elsewhere. And so one of the speculations about what might happen with the development of the European Union as this rise of more and more populist Euroscepticism parties like the Alternative for Germany or the Rally for the Republic in France, or the in Belgium the Vlaams Party, I can't remember the name of it, that the European Union might not revoke the Schengen Treaty, but basically the European Union might not be able to implement or enforce its own agreed policies on the member states, as the member states individually refuse to carry out their obligations under the European Union. And again, immigration is a very emotional topic, even if you can say, for example, you look at this debate question, right? That these countries might need immigration. You can make an economic argument that Greece or Italy or Spain or Bulgaria, they need to bring in immigrants to work in their economies because these countries are not producing enough children to replace their populations that are dying. That without immigration, these countries will be getting smaller and smaller and smaller because people are having smaller and smaller families or fewer and fewer children. And yet people are living to be longer aged, live longer. And of course, as they live longer, they require more medical care as they age particularly, and it's very expensive. And with these countries requiring that everybody have access to medical care, it's very expensive. So you need people to work who are younger to pay taxes in order to provide this medical care for old people who are getting close to the end of their lives. My age, I'm in my late 50s, right? And so people of my parents' generation, they're all passing away now. And typically, the last 5 years of their lives, they're always in a hospital. They're almost always going to doctors. It's so expensive to take care of people when they get close to the end of their lives because they're always requiring medical coverage, medical care, and somebody's got to pay for that. So you can make an economic argument that these countries need immigration. Of course, Angela Merkel in Germany did make that argument, right? That Germany needs more immigration because Germany has a very well-developed welfare system, welfare policies, including universal health care. And that may be true, and it may be true in the United States, it may be true in South Korea, it may be true in Japan, it may be true in many countries, but we're not talking about rational economic calculation. We're talking about emotion and identity and fear and stereotyping of people who are different from me, your typical Italian, or different from me, your typical Frenchman, or different from me culturally, your typical German. People who are not Christian, people who look differently, have darker skin, practice different religions, have different cultural practices, and because they are so different from me in my perception of what typical German should be, I'm more likely to be afraid of them and blame them for many problems, even if they have nothing to do with my problems, right? Like crime, for example. Blame them as a source of danger, crime in United States for Hispanic people from Mexico coming to the United States, for example, or blame them for crime in France, or blame them for crime in Germany coming from Middle Eastern Muslim countries. But so this is a very sensitive topic. And it might be the biggest source of threat really to the European Union as a whole, because as we saw in the case of Britain leaving the European Union, the main issue, not the only issue, but the main issue driving support for Britain leaving the European Union, for the United Kingdom leaving the European Union, was that the European Union was making it too easy for people from around the world to enter into Britain through the European Union one way or another, sooner or later, even if though Britain was never part of the Schengen area, right? As you saw from those videos I was showing at the start of the class, Britain always required, even people coming from Germany or France or Italy who are coming to Great Britain, they had to stop at a passport control office, at a border control office, and they had to show their passport, and they had to be allowed to come in. And so Britain was never part of the Schengen area, but still the claim was made that, well, even though Britain is not in the Schengen area, where you have freedom of movement across borders without showing your passport, without requiring a visa within the European Union member states, plus Norway and Switzerland and Liechtenstein and other small city states, still sooner or later, those people were going to come to Britain because Britain had the more vibrant economy. Britain had more jobs. Britain was an English-speaking country, and so many of these people are coming from countries in Middle East and Africa that have a tradition of speaking English, because they were part of the British Empire at one point, like Iraq or Pakistan or Bangladesh. And that sooner or later they're going to come to Britain, they'll find a way to get in. And that may or may not be true, but that was probably the most important source of support for voting in favor of Britain leaving the United Kingdom leaving the European Union. And so this is a really important topic, because with global climate change, with the economic costs of the pandemic and the dislocation and the suffering of the responding to the global COVID-19 pandemic, and all of the increasing economic and social crises due to worsening climate change and the worsening meteorological damage from increasing droughts, increasing floods, and so on, that there's going to be more and more of this migration of people moving from different parts of the world out of desperation to avoid poverty, avoid conflict, or conflict and poverty, because with the increasing economic difficulties, there'll be probably more and more political conflict within these countries as well, leading to violence and war, which will encourage people to leave the country or push the people to leave these countries. So we don't want to underestimate the importance of this topic. And so let's open up the notes for this chapter, so that we can make sure that we do that. And keep in mind that this chapter was written and published on the eve of the COVID-19 pandemic, and maybe since I want to keep you really excited about this topic, let's talk about a current events issue that shows the impact of migration and the perceived threat that migration and immigration poses to the European Union, and how different countries are exploiting that perceived threat or responding to that perceived threat, because there's now an issue going on the border of Poland with Belarus and those countries that are like Belarus that are allied with Russia. And so here is an exercise vote I wanted to show you. Well, let me open up the file first to show you that this topic, which I wanted to show you first. So here is something that I wanted you to vote on. You see here, I have a question here. Let me insert a break so that we make this a little bit clearer to look at. So this is the topic, right? The question is, please respond to the following statement. Many of the refugees trafficked by the Belarusian authorities on the border with Poland will eventually be allowed in the European Union. So what is this referring to? So maybe I should open up a Wikipedia, the Wikipedia page for Belarus, just to remind you where Belarus is. And it's it's a country of the former Soviet Union, and it has a border with a few member states of the European Union. And so we go here, and so here you see Belarus. Let me share the screen. Let me go here, share screen. And there you see Belarus. There's Belarus. So it was one of the republics of the old Soviet Union, along with Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Ukraine, Belarus. And so Belarus has a border with European Union countries, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, well, actually not with Estonia, with Latvia, and Lithuania, and Bulgaria, and Poland, sorry, with Poland. And so Belarus is ruled by a dictator who's been in power there since 1994. Alexander Lukashenko is the de facto dictator president of Belarus, and he suppresses civil rights. He has claimed that he won an election in August of last year that was apparently due to fraud, claiming that he won 80% of the vote. And so the European Union has put sanctions on Alexander Lukashenko and his government, because claiming that that government is a dictatorship that suppresses human rights, that arrests and tortures democracy, pro-democracy campaigners, that it's it's called the last dictatorship in Europe. That is how the adversaries of Alexander Lukashenko describe it, as the last dictatorship in Europe. And there you see him, and so he has responded. So you can see he's been in office since 1994. And he has responded most recently to the European Union sanctions that have been placed upon different individuals and political figures and leaders in Belarus by encouraging people to come from Iraq and other countries here and flying to Minsk, Belarus. And then once they arrive in Minsk, the capital of Belarus, Minsk, to encourage them then to go to the border with Poland and try to cross the border from Belarus into Poland as refugees, or into Latvia and Lithuania as well, these two countries here. And we've already highlighted in this class about how the intensity of nationalism in Poland. And so Poland, for example, has refused to accept any refugees that came 6 years ago in the big rush of refugees coming in from Turkey and other countries into Europe. Even though Germany accepted over 1 million of those refugees and thousands more since then, Poland and Hungary have refused to accept any refugees, despite what the European Union approved, that all of the different member states of the European Union should each accept a certain number of refugees. Poland has refused to accept any. So now Lukashenko is encouraging these people to fly from Iraq and other countries to get to Belarus, and then pushing them, encouraging them to try to cross the border into Poland and also into Latvia and Lithuania. And so here you see these people are suffering. These people are stuck on the border and they are starting to die. Some of them are starting to die. And now that we are in middle of November, it's very cold in that area. So it says here in this New York Times report, Europe nearest boiling point over borders. And it mentions here that there are thousands of migrants that are waiting on the border with Poland and Belarus to try to cross into Poland. And of course, the Polish police and the army is holding them out, pushing them out, and not accepting them, even though they are suffering and dying of cold. Some of them are even starting to die on the border. Yeah, so it says here, a 14-year-old Kurdish boy was from Iraq was reported by Polish news media frozen to death overnight on the Belarus side of the border. And of course, Alexander Lukashenko is trying to punish Poland and the European Union for putting sanctions on Belarus for its human rights violations and suppression of human rights in Belarus. And Western leaders have accused Alexander Lukashenko, Belarus's autocratic leader, of engineering the crisis, creating a path in European Union countries for migrants from the Middle East. His aim, they say, is to punish Poland and Lithuania for harboring dissidents, Belarusian dissidents, and other opponents of his government, and to pressure the European Union to lifting sanctions on Belarus. Western members of the United Nations Security Council condemned Belarus's actions on Thursday. It says here, in a statement posted Thursday on Facebook, Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki of Poland compared events on the border to those that cost Poland its statehood more than a century ago. While stressing that the situation now is not so dramatic, he said, what we are dealing with is a new type of war. This is a war in which civilians and media messages are the ammunition. Poland and Lithuania, both members of NATO as well as the European Union, have poured thousands of soldiers into the frontier zone to help border guards and police officers beat back what they described as hybrid war by Mr. Lukashenko. And so the Polish army is trying to hold these people out. Polish public opinion is very hostile to bring in any refugees from Belarus, accepting any of these people coming from Iraq and other countries into Poland. It says here, in a sign of escalating tensions, Poland's defense ministry on Thursday reported that soldiers on the border of Białowieża fired warning shots into the air the previous day after a group of 700 migrants attempted to cross the border by force. The migrants, the ministry said, threw objects at the soldiers and then tried to destroy a border fence. In Poland, the government's hardline policy and its decision to forbid all non-residents, including aid workers and European officials, from entering the border zone has played well with its right-wing base among Polish nationals. So the Polish government is not allowing human rights observers, humanitarian workers, European officials into the area to see what is going on. The policies also won support from fellow members of the European bloc, despite angry feuding between Warsaw and Brussels over the rule of law, LGBT rights, and other issues. The nationalist ruling party, Law and Justice, has seized on the crisis with Belarus to trumpet Poland's role as a guardian of Europe's eastern frontier and to counter claims that the country is undermining the union. Again, different Polish officials are stating very nationalistic proclamations. Poland is under attack, he said, this person, head of a nationalist group. Today is the duty of every Polish patriot to support the state. You know, again, these people see what happened, for example, in Greece, where, as I mentioned, thousands of people are still living in camps in Greece, refugees, waiting for their asylum applications to be processed in Greece. So, of course, Polish leaders do not want these people coming into Poland and then, under the Dublin rules, being required to stay in Poland while their asylum applications are being processed. Even though, according to the United Nations 1951 Refugee Asylum Convention, any person legally has the right to go into another country and claim asylum, claim that they're being persecuted for their religious or political beliefs, and to have my asylum application processed in Korea or in Italy or wherever. But the Polish officials are not permitting these people to cross into Poland to claim asylum. Even, of course, as Lukashenko is encouraging them to come to Belarus and try to push them into Poland. Extremist crowds and elements in the crowd, which also include young families pushing baby carriages, shouted demands that border guards shoot migrants instead of just pushing them back into Belarus when they cross into Poland. It goes on here, thousands of migrants, many of them Iraqi Kurds, have been escorted to the borders of Poland, Lithuania, and Latvia under the watchful eyes of the Belarusian authorities, according to EU officials. And once there, they're stranded in bitter cold, prevented from entering the European Union or from going back into Belarus. So, of course, the Belarus police and soldiers are not letting them leave the border to go back to someplace in Belarus. And again, there was this mention, somebody, at least one person froze to death on the border, a child. So my question to you is, do you think many of the refugees trafficked by the Belarusian authorities on the border with Poland will eventually be allowed in the European Union? Do you strongly agree, neutral cannot decide, disagree, strongly disagree, that sooner or later, many of these refugees that the Belarusian authorities have encouraged to come to Belarus and then push them by giving them easy, free visa access to Belarus, and then once they arrive in Minsk, pushing them towards the border to go into Poland? Do you think that many of these refugees will sooner or later be allowed into Poland? And so that's my question to you. And let me go back then to the breakout rooms, and so form you into a breakout room. And so how many people we have here today? So let's form two groups, assign automatically. And so please join your groups. So Marie, UJE, please join room 1. Ken Tongun and Owen Tech join room 2. And try to decide where you fit on this scale as to whether or not you think sooner or later a significant proportion of these refugees will eventually be allowed into Poland. Or do you think that no, they're not going to be allowed to enter Poland? They're not going to be allowed in. None. And of course, there's no right or wrong answer, but it does require you to think about how powerful is nationalism? How long does it last as a motivation? And I will flip a coin to determine where I am on the scale. And so heads, I am 1 or 2, and it's heads. So heads, I'm 1, and it is tails. So I agree. I think that someone will be brought in. So so let me write an agree statement. And heads, it's the first person each group will speak, and it's heads. So that means Marie and Kang Tong-un will speak. So Marie for room 1 and Kang Tong-un for room 2 will speak. So let me write my agree statement, and again show you the screen share. Okay. Okay, so let me go back to the breakout rooms and close all rooms. Okay, so who will speak first, Marie or Kang Tong-un? So heads, it's Marie, and it is heads. So Marie, where did your group fit on this scale?
We think that eventually they will allow migration to the EU.
Yeah.
To the EU.
Do you think they will? Do you go on? Go on. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you can ask.
Okay. Do you think they're going to stay in Poland?
I think eventually they will leave Poland.
Yeah, I mean, eventually, yeah, sooner or later. I mean, again, I think that's the concern that Polish people have, that these thousands, that hundreds, if not thousands of refugees will end up being stranded in Poland the way they're stranded in Greece. And I, again, one of the reasons why I like doing these exercises is because it makes me think through scenarios and therefore to predict and therefore evaluate my own theoretical framework for evaluating these issues, I would expect that what's going to happen is that Frontex is the European Union's border patrol system. It's called, I'm spelling it here so you can see it on the screen, Frontex. And that's the border control service of the European Union itself, not of the Polish border control or the Latvian or the Lithuanian border control of those member states. It's the European Union's border patrol. So what I can imagine happening is that first off, they will try, what they are trying to do, for example, is first off, they're stopping Iraq and Turkish airlines and airlines flying from Iraq to bring people to Belarus. So like they're telling the Turkish Air out of Turkey, don't bring people into Belarus without visas or without European approval. So they're trying to stop the flow into Belarus from Iraq and other countries by using their pressure over various airline companies that if they want to do business in the European Union, they have to stop encouraging or flying people from Iraq to Belarus. So they're trying to stop the flow that way into Belarus, because people to get to Belarus, they have to fly there. They can't just walk. They have to fly on a plane. And but I can imagine a scenario whereby Frontex steps in and takes control of a significant number of refugees, particularly those who are sick or dying, who are sick or are going to are risk of dying from cold, from exposure in the winter, in the fall and winter there, and bring them from that area to Germany, for example, without keeping them in Poland, because it's of the nationalist sensitivities in Poland and the intense nationalism in that country that we will see, as we typically have seen so far in these crises involving the European Union, a significant increase in the power and capabilities and role of the European Union institutions themselves. So Frontex, that organization called Frontex, is likely going to become more and more important and more visible and get more and more resources and more responsibilities to deal with situations like these, so that these refugees, if they come into the European Union, they're not stuck in Poland. They're going to bring them to probably Germany. And it's only going to be a handful. We're talking about a few hundred. It's not like thousands and thousands, because as I said, these refugees cannot get to Belarus unless they get on a plane and fly there. They can't walk like they did to get through Turkey to Greece, right? So we're talking about hundreds of refugees, and some of the sick ones they will bring to Germany through Frontex, not through Poland. And I would not be surprised that we'll see, again, a European Union response in the form of deepening and expansion of the powers of the European Union institutions in response to this crisis, building upon the foundations already created. Frontex is already active, but it's supposed to help the member states. It's not replacing the member states' border guards and border patrol. It's supposed to assist, and we'll probably see it become more and more prominent, more and more important. So I want to see what by the way, what Wikipedia has here about Frontex. Let's see what the European Wikipedia has here about Frontex. So let me share the screen. And so here's what Wikipedia, I've never looked at this. So you can see Frontex, the European Border and Coast Guard Agency, also known as Frontex from French, is an agency of the European Union headquartered in Warsaw, Poland. Oh, it's headquartered, I forgot. Frontex is headquartered in Warsaw, in Poland, right? And it's tasked with border control of the European Schengen area in coordination with the border and coast guards of Schengen area member states. So, and so you can see that this Frontex was established in 2004, and then it grew in size in response to the European migrant crisis in 2015-16. And it's probably going to expand some more in response to this current crisis. So I can well imagine that becoming, again, the European Union institutions becoming more and more important, looking more and more like a federal government for Europe. So you can see these are the Schengen area, and Poland is part of the Schengen area. Here's Poland, right? And so you can see this is the Wikipedia entry for Frontex. I've never been to this website before, so I'm just looking for the first time with you. And so I would imagine this is going to be, well, we'll see what happens. So let me again then go back to the next group. And Kang Tong-un, where does your group fit on this scale?
First of all, I got a cold, so I say just few words. Sorry. We think they are allowed to be into Poland by strengthening of pressure of the EU.
Yeah. I mean, the European Union has punished member states like a few years ago, not a few years ago, I think a year or two ago, Frontex withdrew all of its resources from Hungary because Hungary refused to allow any refugees to come into Hungary to cross Hungary's border. So Frontex withdrew all of its resources from Hungary. But that really hasn't changed Hungary's behavior. But I would expect that you know you're going to see a more prominent role for Frontex in this. And but again, but the refugees have to go somewhere. And not all of them, like I said, the ones that are sick and dying. So well, we'll see. Okay, so let me stop the share then and ask you to vote on this. So let me go back to the Cyber Campus and vote. So let me share the screen. She'll share screen. So please vote on respond to the following statement. Many of the refugees trafficked by the Belarusian authorities on the border with Poland will eventually be allowed in the European Union. I didn't say all, I said many. Okay, so vote please. You have 15 seconds.
Sir, can I ask something?
Yeah.
I saw in the attendance that I was like marked absent last Friday, but I was in class with you, so I don't get it.
Okay, well, let me send me an email to remind me to check that after class and I'll fix it, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so please vote. Oh, vote. Oh, you all did. Okay, so you're neutral cannot decide. All of you are neutral or cannot decide. Okay, all right. I mean, it's going to be very difficult for the European Union to just allow these people to die. So what, you know, is Lukashenko going to, of course, you know, we see this bigger conflict between Russia and the European Union being played out here, that Russia is the main supporter of Lukashenko in Belarus. They have problems with Alexander Lukashenko. Vladimir Putin has conflicts with Alexander Lukashenko, but he also is supporting Lukashenko because Lukashenko is willing to cooperate closely with Russia, although not as closely as Russia would like. So the Russians are attempting to pressure the European Union and use leverage on the European Union to reduce leverage and sanctions on Russia, not to mention on Belarus, from the European Union, going back, for example, to Russia's annexation of Crimea 7 years ago in 2014. The European Union put economic sanctions on Russia because of Russia's intervention, informal intervention in Ukraine and annexing the Crimean Peninsula to Russia. And so this is all part of this increasingly indirect form of competition between powerful member states in which you know, the danger of escalation is always a strong concern, given that these countries are very powerful, and you know, they include NATO and nuclear weapons armed countries like Russia and the United States, and these countries have rulers that are not, whose regimes may not be very stable. So they're trying to play with this threat of unintended escalation while trying to control it, to use it as leverage to push the European Union to remove its economic sanctions on Belarus and therefore on Russia for adopting policies that United States and NATO and the European Union oppose, like for example, in Ukraine and elsewhere. So to show, that of course that, the European Union is vulnerable to policies of Belarus and Russia that can risk instability, increasing instability in the European Union itself because of, for example, this intense Polish nationalism and this hostility to migrants. So it's hard for me to imagine the government in Poland is going to allow any of these migrants into Poland. Even as, like, for example, again, some number of people have already died from exposure, froze to death. I mean, one number I heard that there are unconfirmed reports that up to 8 people already died from exposure stuck in this border area between Belarus and Poland. The Belarusian soldiers and police will not let them leave to go back to Minsk, and the Polish soldiers and police will not let them enter Poland. So they're just sitting there and they're just, suffering. And so it's a critical, and again, it goes back to this immigration issue is maybe the most critical issue because, for example, it did lead as the main factor contributing to the Brexit vote to leave the European Union by the United Kingdom. And everybody knows this, right? So it'll be interesting to see how this develops. But probably, as I speculated, we'll see an increase in the power of the European Union institutions in response. So that's one introduction to this material for this week, to show you the importance of this material. And let me open up those or go back to those notes to begin talking about them. And let me close that site and no, don't save. And so let me go to the notes here. So I think you can see these notes here. So it covers social policy, but we've been talking about justice and home affairs. So border control falls under justice and home affairs, or JHA. And it's formally called the coming up with an area of freedom, justice, and security for all of the European Union area within the framework of the European Union, including some kind of common border control and immigration policies. And this is going to become more and more important as, of course, there's more and more immigration pressure into the European Union from Asia and Africa as economic catastrophes increase with the global climate change. And so the migration crisis has led to a stronger focus on securing the EU borders. And again, this is covering basically on the eve of the global pandemic. And as a result, much of what is the Justice and Home Affairs straddles the line between EU external and EU internal policy areas. So we are already seeing a big increase, for example, of migration into the United States and also pressure to come into the European Union from these countries in Asia and Africa that were already in desperate conditions, made even worse by dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. But let me just jump ahead to justice and home affairs policies here, because that's what we've been talking about so far. So, as we go through justice and home affairs. So the Treaty of Rome that established the European Economic Community had no reference to justice and home affairs issues. But beginning in the mid-1970s, the European Economic Community member states began sharing information about common migration policies. And then when the acceleration of European integration increased, then the European Economic Community and later the European Union accepted formally and publicly and officially in its treaties that the European Union needed to have a common migration and border control policy, and needed to come up with structured cooperation in enforcing border controls and monitoring the migrations across the area. So, and this was really expressed clearly in the Maastricht Treaty, which adopted 3 so-called pillars or columns in creating the European Union, new European Union, because the Maastricht Treaty officially renamed the European Community as the European Union. And justice and home affairs is one of these 3 pillars, along with common foreign security policy and the long-established European Economic Community. Those are the 2 other pillars. This is the 3rd pillar. And And justice and home affairs issues deal directly with politically highly sensitive issues that are the essence of national sovereignty as they are embedded in national judicial and political systems. So we're talking about, harmonization of laws, of policing, of justice issues, of policing, like issues that are particularly sensitive to nationalist hostility, particularly now when we're talking about dealing with immigration. Because if a country is in the Schengen area and somebody has the right to come into Poland, it conceivably becomes easier for those people coming into any member state of the European Union to get access to any other member state in the Schengen area. And the Amsterdam Treaty from 1996 elaborated on justice and home affairs by creating officially what was called an area of freedom, security, and justice, AFSJ, within the European Union, preparing to move away from intergovernmentalism as a decision-making rule. So that means justice and home affairs, like common foreign security policy, when they were first adopted in the Maastricht Treaty of 1992-93, any policies adopted by the member states regarding justice and home affairs and common foreign security policy had to be agreed by unanimous consent. All of the member states had to agree before those policies could be adopted under the common foreign security policy and as well under the justice and home affairs policy. But as it began to move, the Amsterdam Treaty, the European Union began to move towards incorporating justice and home affairs within the ordinary legislative procedure, involving, in other words, majority rule. In other words, not unanimous consent by all the member states, but rather other methods of decision-making in which you would adopt policies under the framework of the European community, whereby you would have, qualified majority voting in the Council of Ministers. European Parliament has to vote. The European Commission has to make a proposal, and then the Council of Ministers has to vote by qualified majority vote, and the European Parliament has to vote. In other words, it doesn't require unanimous consent by all the member states. And for example, accepting those migrants 6 years ago during the migration crisis, that was determined through the European Union's ordinary legislative procedure, whereby they agree by majority, qualified majority among all of the countries of the European Union. And this was adopted over the objections of Poland and Hungary. And Poland and Hungary have refused still to include or accept any of those immigrants that were approved to be allocated among all the member states under this ordinary legislative procedure of the European Union. And that's been the case for 6 years. And the European Commission has been complaining, and they've been, and they haven't really done much to punish Hungary and Poland. I told you Frontex withdrew, I think, last year, all of its resources from Hungary, which, is more a symbolic move, but they haven't really punished Hungary and Poland for not implementing the European Union's laws regarding immigration and refugees. So it's hard for me to believe that they're going to punish Poland for refusing to allow any of these immigrants to come into Poland and claim asylum. Well, we'll see. We'll see what will happen. Okay, so that's where we have to stop there. And that's it for today. And so now I have to go get set up for my other class. So I'm gonna have to end the class, okay? So that's all for today.